I had no idea the British press was so bigoted.
This one's wife. Meghan pleaded, "Don't leave me." Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. You might think it's strange for a narcissist to plead. After all, why would an individual who believes that they are superior, special in the center of the universe, ever need to beg or plead? Why would somebody that would regard themselves as above everybody else demean themselves by begging and pleading? Well, the fact is that when it comes to the necessity of dealing with a threat to control, the narcissist will utilize a variety of different measures to achieve the assertion of control. And it depends upon what type of narcissist that you are dealing with. Some narcissists will not beg. They will not plead. It is beneath them. Other narcissists will routinely engage in such behavior. They don't consider that it is beneath them. The desperation that is experienced as the consequence of a threat to control means that they will pull out all of the stops in order to nullify that threat to control. It is particularly the case where someone states that they are leaving the narcissist, that this causes a massive threat to control. If you just walk off and leave the narcissist, you cause wounding, and it is substantial. And if you are the intimate partner primary source that does this, the wounding can be catastrophic. This is because you are the most important person in the narcissist's fuel matrix, and your departure smashes a huge hole. The fuel levels plummet. The self-esteem of the narcissist is massively dented, nay, blown apart by your departure. If you threaten to leave the narcissist, you are, as you will understand, issuing challenge fuel, because you're engaging with the narcissist, which means you're giving the narcissist fuel, but you're threatening the need for control by telling the narcissist, "I'm leaving you." Thus, the potential damage to the fuel matrix, although the unaware narcissist doesn't see it as such, is substantial. And this means it's a red alert at Narc HQ. Klaxons blaring, lights flashing, as the narcissism deploys whatever is necessary, commensurate with the type of narcissist that it is, to prevent this departure. This is done by way of what is known as a preventative hoover. Some narcissists will simply utilize charm by way of a preventative hoover to stop that person departing. Others will utilize threat. Some will revert to physical violence. Others will turn on the pity play, the sympathy symphony, perhaps the waterworks, occurring as they beg and plead. They might triangulate with, "You can't leave me, I'm ill," and all of a sudden, a hidden illness is suddenly revealed to the victim. A narcissist such as this one's wife, being mid-range, means that she is largely passive-aggressive and has a very large streak of victimhood about her. This means that pity plays are an extensive part of her repertoire. And as a mid-range narcissist, she would beg and plead by way of preventative hoover. Indeed, in the circumstances where someone substantial in her fuel matrix threatened to leave, she would be likely to beg and plead, possibly utilize a little charm at first, and ultimately move on to threat in order to try and stop that person departing the fuel matrix. But who is it that we're referencing that caused this one's wife to plead, "Don't leave me"? Well, according to Radar Online, it relates to her mother. And I touched on this earlier about how Doria Ragland basically had enough of this one's wife, but more details have emerged, although it's not stated precisely where they've come from, about the circumstances of her departure and the reaction of this one's wife. And it's particularly the reaction of this one's wife which is useful for helping you understand more about her and narcissism. The article by Matthew Acton explains, "This one's wife howled, 'Don't leave me,' as her mother, Doria Ragland, moved out of her and her henpecked husband, Prince Harry's Monte-Shitshow mansion. The departure came after Diva Duchess, this one's wife, used her mother to care for her kids, residual benefit. And sources tell us even her own mother got so sick of her constant moaning and drama, she had to flee the luxury home." Now, I mentioned in a video earlier this week about the reaction of Doria Ragland to her daughter's behaviour, whereby, as a narcissist herself, the repeated demands that her daughter would place upon her would amount to a threat to her control. And ultimately, her own needs have to come before that of her daughter, have to come before that of her grandchildren, and therefore she would depart. It's also the case that one suspects that Doria Ragland really only tolerates this one's wife as a consequence of the association of fame and, most of all, money. It is something that is regularly speculated about with regard to the financial status of the Sussexes, and given the fact that neither of them have proper jobs and that there doesn't appear to be any deals in the pipeline, along with their high overheads, it isn't wild speculation to put forward the suggestion that their financial circumstances are diminishing. They're not exactly looking for food stamps and sofa surfing, but nevertheless, the situation doesn't look particularly auspicious as a consequence of their substantial overheads and lack of foreseeable income. Doria Ragland, operating as a parasite like her daughter, will only really involve herself when there's something in it for her. Accordingly, she'll help out with the children because it will enable her to receive fuel by way of gratification and gratitude. But a significant slice of why she remains involved with the Sussexes, bearing in mind that Harry's bombed out of his mind probably most of the time and her daughter is a pain in the backside, is the money. The ability to receive money from her daughter to help her out. And if that's starting to dry up, it means that her tolerance for the behaviours diminishes. Remember, a narcissist will tolerate and deal with repeated threats to control if there are additional benefits. So, for example, I've often spoken about how with this one's wife, she won't return to the United Kingdom because her narcissism perceives there's too many threats. But ultimately, if there was something extraordinary that would make it worth her while, her narcissism would deal with those threats to control for the bigger win. And it's similar for Doria Ragland. One suspects that she's put up with the whining and complaining behaviour of this one's wife, the repeated drama, because she benefited from them financially. As I've explained to you on many occasions, because of the repeated threats to control that this one's wife has, she can't deal with them head on. She can't deal with them through the first assertion of control. What that means is she'll basically moan about it. And if her mother's on the premises, there's a good chance that she'll keep turning to her mother and complaining about, "I'm the most bullied woman on the internet, I'm hard done to, they've got it in for me, people keep lying about me, if only they'd tell the truth about me, yada yada, rhubarb, rhubarb, whine, whine, whinge, whinge." And of course, having no emotional empathy for her daughter, Doria Ragland will soon get sick to the back teeth of listening to this. But if she's getting a residual benefit by way of money, her narcissism basically says in the subconscious, grit your teeth, see it through, you're getting something out of this, deal with the threats to control posed by her repeated whining. One suspects, therefore, that for her to depart, it's a combination of having had enough of the constant moaning and drama as reported, but also that residual benefit of money isn't quite there as it once was. Apparently, insiders say that Doria Ragland's departure has left the Sussexes struggling to adjust without her. Apparently, Doria was a steady support for Harry and this one's wife during a tough time. She provided them with much-needed emotional strength, but she has her own life and social circle, and she was getting sick of her own daughter's constant moaning and dramas. This one's wife is deeply upset about her mother leaving. She even pleaded, "Don't leave me," as she walked out the door with her suitcases. Harry also regarded Doria as a mother figure, and both are feeling her absence. Quite who it is that witnessed this "don't leave me" as Doria stood at the door with her suitcases remains to be seen. But if that is accurate, it is certainly the case that a narcissist would plead with an individual as they sought to leave, because the issue of embarrassment, shame, and dignity are irrelevant when it comes to a mid-range narcissist needing to assert control. Thus, it would appear that Doria has departed. My view is that the money isn't there as it once was, which means that there is no ulterior motive for her to tolerate the whining and whinging of her daughter, and she's not prepared to provide that supposed emotional support and help with the children gratis. After all, she's a narcissist, and just like her daughter, she uses people, and she's only in it when there's something in it for her. It also demonstrates the preventative hoover that her daughter is a mid-range type A narcissist deployed for the purposes of trying to prevent her mother from leaving, but it would appear that it has failed. This hasn't blasted a huge hole in her fuel matrix because her mother is a non-intimate secondary source. It's not like Harry has left her. But nevertheless, she was important in that she was living with them, therefore she would be providing larger amounts of fuel than a non-intimate secondary source would ordinarily do so, and she came with the residual benefit of being there to assist or look after the children, so that freed up this one's wife to stay up all night worrying about packaging. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.